Well, hello, history nerds and historians. My name is Krystina, and this is Effed Up Mythology. This is where we talk about a little tidbit from mythology that's super fucked up. So, trigger warning before we start. This episode discusses suicide, self-harm, death, abuse, kidnapping, war, incest, depression, grief, and seeking advice from the goddamn Oracle of Delphi. So, last time we talked about Oedipus. If you did not listen to that, I would highly suggest to go back and do so, because a bit of this might not really make sense if you haven't. But to give a quick recap, if it's been a while since you've listened to that episode, or if you're familiar with it and you don't want to listen to my take on it, which, I mean, why are you here if you don't want to listen to my take on a myth? But Oedipus was Prince of Corinth. He went to an oracle because he's an idiot and he has a death wish. And the oracle told him that he would kill his father and marry his mother, so he fled his hometown. During his travels, he came across an older man traveling down the path. They get into an altercation that descends into fisticuffs, and Oedipus ends up killing him and all of his men. Then he winds up at a city called Thebes, where there is a sphinx at the entrance killing anyone who doesn't solve her riddle. Oedipus solves the riddle, ridding Thebes of this monster, and in return he's given the newly widowed Jocasta, queen of Thebes, and becomes king himself. Jocasta is definitely a cougar. She's probably about double his age. They have 4 children together, Eteocles, Polynices, Ismene, and Antigone. About 15 to 20 years after they get married, there is a plague that descends upon Thebes that they find out is caused because the murderer of the former king, Laius, is in Thebes and was never brought to justice. After a lot of back and forth, it's revealed that Laius and Jocasta had a child at one point, but they ordered a servant to kill the baby because there was a different prophecy that the baby would kill Laius, but the servant that they sent to do it couldn't do it. And the baby ended up being brought to Corinth by a shepherd who brought him to the king and queen of Corinth, and he was raised there as prince. And then he found out about the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother, end up fleeing Corinth, and then ending up killing a man on we have become a full circle now. Oedipus was that child. The prophecy is fulfilled. Oedipus, by trying to escape his motherfucking prophecy, becomes the motherfucker. I'm so sorry. I have been waiting my entire life to make that joke. I know it is a very overdone joke. I know it is probably almost as old as the Smith itself, but it is finally my turn to say it. So, so after he figures out that he's fulfilled his prophecy, Jocasta actually figures it out first. She commits suicide. Oedipus blinds himself in retribution for the crimes that he committed that were unbeknownst to him at the time. He demands to be banished from the city. Jocasta's brother Creon comes in and he acts as king, standing in while they're trying to figure out everything that's going on. Oedipus embraces his 2 daughters, Ismene and Antigone, goes into the castle with their fate unknown. And that is where we left off. So today we are going to talk about everything that happened after that, which can be found in 2 of Sophocles' other plays. The Oedipus story is actually a trilogy. So today we'll be doing Oedipus at Colonus and then Antigone, which is my favorite. We'll also be talking a little bit about 7 Against Thebes, which is a play by Aeschylus, which was written after everything else. But everything is all really closely related, and you just kind of can't tell one without the other, without leaving out major parts of the story. Oedipus can be a standalone, it shouldn't, because you don't get the whole story. But if you don't know that these other plays exist, you wouldn't be realizing that you're missing out on anything, because it's a full and complete story, So this is the rest of it, and you kind of have to link all of it together to know the whole story. Also, shout out to my listeners in Quebec. I got my analytics from 2021, and y'all are responsible for over a quarter of my listens, which is really, really exciting. I didn't think that anyone would ever listen to me, let alone having international listeners. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone else who has listened wherever you are. I am coming up on my 1-year anniversary, and I have so many fun things planned for this year, and I hope that you really all enjoy it as much as I do. So, without further ado, anyway, here we go. Sit back, relax, and practice your, oh good God, what the fuck faces. So, unsurprisingly, Oedipus is banished. He is blind from what he did to himself, and he's just fated to wander around for the rest of his life. His daughter Antigone actually joins him. She becomes his guide and his only companion. She's really the only one of his children who stays by him, like no matter what, with no issue at all. His other daughter Ismene still comes to see him and like goes and does tasks for him and like finds out information. But Antigone is the one that is always with him. She is his eyes and his guide and honestly probably his only friend. I mean, he didn't know that Jocasta was his mother. It wasn't like he willingly committed incest or anything that led to the birth of these children. Thebes is not the backwoods of Kentucky. God, I apologize to any listeners who live in Kentucky. Perhaps I should have said North Florida because it would have been a little bit of a dig on myself, seeing as I was born and raised in Florida. Although my parents were not related in any way whatsoever, but it's too late now. So I've can't cancel Krystina in Kentucky, I guess. So anyway. Oedipus ends up in Colonus, which is like a little town in Athens. Initially, he's turned away because that city is afraid that he will anger the Furies, who look at Colonus as a sacred land. The Furies are vengeance deities. They are like personifications of the anger of the dead and the mistreated. They date way back. If you remember, we talked about like the Greek interpretation of the creation of the earth. And one of the theories about Aphrodite's origins is that when Kronos castrated his father Uranus and tossed the manly bits into the sea, Aphrodite emerged from the sea foam. Well, the myth goes a little further. There are actually other creatures that were born from this as well. From where the blood dropped from the castration, the Furies emerged along with some other creatures. So, I mean, that's one of the myths. There are, other ones too. I think that there's one myth that they're like the children of Nyx, which is the night and like the only deity that Zeus fears or something like that. But the most widely accepted is that they were born from the blood drops of the castration of Uranus. So there are different ones that are mentioned. They don't really know like how many they are. It fluctuates, but they are mostly named Electo, which means unceasing, Megira, which means grudging, and Tisiphone, which means avenging murder. So being vengeance deities, they would stalk and persecute people who violated natural laws, with the biggest one of those natural laws being murder. So Oedipus, being a confessed murderer, might not be the best person to be in a town that's considered sacred by the Furies who persecute murderers. So when he arrives in Colonus, the people are like trying to get him to leave so he doesn't upset the Furies by disrespecting them. Because like, I'm sorry, if there is one mythological figure or mythological group that I don't want to piss off, it's the Furies. And like maybe Hera. She's scary when you get on her bad side. And by get on her bad side, I do mean get sexually assaulted by her husband. So Oedipus told them that he wasn't responsible for his crimes because he acted in self-defense and ignorance. He also told them that he was on a sacred mission and asks to see Theseus, who we've mentioned him briefly before when we talked about Medea, but he is now the king of Athens, and he is not my favorite. He's probably actually best known as the man who defeated the Minotaur in Crete. But yeah, we'll talk about him at some point. You'll find out why I don't like him. But yeah. So all the people at Colonus kind of like give Oedipus a break while they wait for Theseus to come. And while he's waiting, his other daughter Ismene comes to meet them with not great news. She's like, okay, I've got bad news and I've got bad news. Which news do you want first? You want the bad news? Okay. So it turns out, Oedipus, after you were banished, your oldest son, Polynices, became king. But Eteocles, Oedipus's younger son, decided that he wanted to be king. And he raised an army and usurped the throne from Polynices with the help of Creon, and now the two brothers were heading towards war. So Polynices had fled to Argos, and he was raising an army there. Ismene also tells him that Creon has gone to the Oracle because he didn't learn his lesson at all in the previous play, seeing how that worked for everyone. Like, even if I didn't already have strong negative opinions of the Oracle, if I was in Thebes and witnessed everything that happened with Oedipus because he went to the Oracle, I don't think I would seek out the Oracle. I'd just be like, you know what? Some things are not for me to know. I will allow my life to be a mystery as the gods intended. But no, Creon literally buried his sister, which, like, you could say is the direct product of Oedipus trying to change the oracle's predictions. But no, Creon is still fine. He still went. And basically, she told Creon that Oedipus will bring luck to whatever city he's buried in. So Oedipus already knows that, though, because when he went to the oracle way back when and received the whole, like, murder dad, fuck mom thing, she also told him that he would bring luck to any city in death. But also, a step further, what his sons and Creon don't know is that this place that he would die in would be a place that would be sacred to the Furies, aka colonists. So the last thing that Ismene tells him is that because of this prophecy, everyone is now like super interested in what's going on with Oedipus. And it's been years now since everything happened in Thebes, and Polynices and Eteocles pretty much abandoned him. And so Oedipus is like fucking pissed. He's like, when I was getting exiled, my sons did not say a goddamned thing. And when I was being removed from Thebes, they didn't come and embrace me one last time or give me any like encouraging or loving parting words. It was Antigone who came with me, and Ismene who keeps me up to date on everything and still supports me and makes sure that I'm okay. But my sons, who like in ancient Greece could help me by giving me money or making sure that I'm okay or setting me up with property and all these other things that males can do but females can't, fucking don't. They let me be a blind, poor beggar. But wouldn't you fucking know, now that the goddamn oracle has said that I might be important to the outcome of this war, now they care? Ismene also tells Oedipus at this point that Creon is on his way to Colonus, but not with good intentions. He's planning on bringing Oedipus back to Thebes, but when he dies, burying him outside of city lines without burial rites so that neither son will be victorious, and then he'll be the only one who will be left that can be king. And now he'll be uncontested. No wonder Shakespeare used this name for the uncle in Hamlet. So Oedipus tells Ismene that he's not going to support any of them, and he begs colonists to allow him to stay so that Creon cannot force him to go back to Thebes. And they're like, we can't make any decisions for you. You'll have to wait until Theseus comes. And oh, look, here he is to save the day. So Theseus comes in. He already knows about Oedipus. He doesn't ask him any questions. He actually offers sympathy to Oedipus and makes him a citizen of Athens, like without any further questions. And therefore he can be buried there whenever he dies and like receive all of the burial rites. Oedipus warns Theseus that this means that Thebes will most likely declare war on him and try to steal his body. Theseus is like, dude, if it matters that much, why don't you just go back? It sounds like a lot of problems. And if you were returned to Thebes, they'd probably welcome you now that they know the prophecy. And Oedipus is like, fuck those bitches. They are cruel, and the moment that I was no longer beneficial to them, they abandoned me. There are no friends there. There is no love there. There is no trust there. Fuck Thebes. Fuck their couch. Fuck that shit they call art. Everyone except their dog can fuck off. And Theseus is like, okay, dude, you can stay here as long as you want. I promise to protect you. And I know that a lot of people have betrayed you in the past, but I will never betray you. And I will never abandon you, Oedipus, because I only do that to beautiful princesses who help me on my quest in return for my promise in marriage, who I then leave on a random fucking island about 100 miles away from here. Soon after that, Creon comes and is like, over that boy, hand over that boy. Oh, poor Oedipus, you've been away from home for far too long. Just come back and we'll take care of you. That whole father killing and mother marrying thing can just be a thing of the past. It's cool, dude. Besides, you wandering around make Thebes look so much worse than if you were to be in the city where we would take care of you. And Oedipus is like, bitch, you're the one who fucking banished me. You made me live this life, and besides, I know about the prophecy. You're not fucking fooling me now. Leave me alone and let me fucking die in peace. It won't be long off. I'm probably sick and old, and I've lived a stressful life. Just fuck off, man, and leave me alone. And Creon will not just fuck off man and leave him alone. He literally orders his guards to kidnap Antigone and Ismene, and they drag the girls off. And Oedipus can only do so much, seeing as like he can't see where they've gone off to, seeing as he's blind. He asks Creon to let them go, and Creon grabs at him and tells Oedipus that he will drag him back to Thebes as well. And Theseus comes in and is like, what the fuck is happening? You cannot come in and just kidnap people. What the fuck is wrong with you? Even I know that's not something you should do, and I'm terrible. Oh God, I really have strong feelings about Theseus. His myth is going to be really hard to do, guys. Like I plan on doing it later on this year. His myth is going to be really hard to do. I hate him, and you're not supposed to hate him. You're supposed to like Theseus. So Creon, realizing that he's outnumbered, is like, you haven't seen the last of me, and rides away like upside down on his horse or whatever. And if you understood that reference of who I am comparing Creon to, that you are my people and I love you. And if not, you need to educate yourself in Mel Brooks, because he is just like a shining gem of comedy. Okay. So Theseus chases Creon and takes back Antigone and Ismene, and lets Oedipus know that a stranger from Argos has arrived in Athens and wishes to speak to Oedipus. And Oedipus is like, well, there's only one fucking person that could be, and I refuse to speak to my brother/son. Antigone tries to convince Oedipus to listen to him, and at the end of the day, like, Oedipus, he's still your son. He's made mistakes, but you made mistakes when you were young, and you don't have to agree with him, and you don't have to do anything that he asks, but at least hear him out. And Oedipus disagrees, like, simply on principle, but Theseus is like, we're not going to let anything happen to you. It'll be fine. Just hear him out. So Oedipus agrees to talk to Polynices. So just like in the first play, there are like just random men who are standing by that are observing this whole play. They're called the chorus. They're pretty much in every Greek play. They sort of like serve the role of like what the audience would say who's watching it, and like what society would say about it and stuff. So these random guys are there, and out of nowhere, while Oedipus is going to walk over to Polynices, they're like, oh, life is terrible. It would be better to never be born. But like, if you had to be born, let it be a short life, because life is unbearable and only death can bring peace. And oh, look, here's Polynices in a way that's not foreshadowing in any way whatsoever. So Polynices comes in, and he actually apologizes to Oedipus and says like that he regrets letting him be exiled, and that he wishes that he would have done more to stop it, or that he would have done more afterwards to help him. And it took him being forcibly kicked out of Thebes to realize this, and he doesn't understand how Oedipus did not want to take revenge, and that Polynices has raised an army and he plans on taking the throne back by force, and that Oedipus is like welcome to come with him, and he will make sure that he is taken care of. This army that he's raised is referred to as the Seven Against Thebes, which like band name called it, but basically it's like 7 champions who are picked by the king of Argos to be captains in the army that Polynices is leading. They're typically named as Polynices, Tydeus, Amphiaraus, Capaneus, Parthenopaeus, Hippomedon, and Eteoclus, although in some versions it is the king of Argos who's there instead of Eteoclus, who is Adrastus. So Polynices does like his whole speech, and Oedipus just stands there and listens to him but doesn't say anything. He barely even looks at him, and there's just like this really awkward silence until one of the random onlooker chorus dudes is like, just please fucking say something. And Oedipus responds that he wishes that he never set eyes on Polynices, that he doesn't feel sorry for him. In fact, it is poetic justice that he's now in exile and suffering just like Oedipus has suffered. And if Polynices is coming to ask for his support, or like trying to trick him into returning with him to Argos so that he'll die there and Argos will be victorious in battle, like, it's not happening. So you wasted your time coming to Athens to talk to me, Polynices, and I curse you, and I curse your brother Eteocles that you will die at each other's hands. And Polynices is like, awesome. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate it. Good talk. Great. And he sort of just dejectedly asks his sisters to make sure that he's buried properly if he's killed in battle. Antigone begs him to call off the war and is like, the throne is not worth it, and this is all your pride, and it's a suicide mission, man. Like, you are not Harley Quinn, you are not Deadshot, you are Slipknot, and you will die immediately. And Polynices just says that his fate is in God's hands, and he wishes his sisters well, and he leaves for Thebes without saying another word to his father. And then there's a terrible thunderstorm. And Oedipus determines that this is a sign from the gods that his time has come, or rather that his time is up, I guess. Like, he's about to die. He's determined that this thunderstorm means that it's time for him to die. So he enters the grove that's sacred to the Furies with his daughters and Theseus, and prepares himself for death. When it comes time for him to actually die, he sends his daughters away because he only wants Theseus to know where he's buried. Apparently he just becomes one with the Force and disappears into thin air like Obi-Wan Kenobi, like Eddie-Wan Kenobi. Like, literally, we don't know how he dies. Theseus doesn't say. He could have committed suicide or been swallowed by the earth or been fucking abducted by aliens while they were on their way to Egypt to build the pyramids. Like, it is a mystery. There is a servant who was close by when it happened, but he said that he turned around and Oedipus had just disappeared into thin air and was gone, and that Theseus was shielding his eyes like he couldn't bear to look at what happened, which, I mean, to me sounds like he committed suicide, and Theseus not telling Antigone and Ismene is a way of protecting them from knowing what actually happened. There is speculation that I read that said that the gods opened up the earth and accepted him into it, and it was divine intervention letting him know that he had paid his debts and that he would be among the heroes in the underworld or whatever. But again, nobody knows. It is quite disappointingly anticlimactic for Oedipus, especially considering how dramatic everything was leading up to it in the first play, and then everything that's led up to in this one. It is so anticlimactic to just be like, we don't know what happened. He disappeared. He exited stage left and never re-entered. He is dead and gone. He is now one with the Force. Do not mourn him, for he is where he wants to be. But after Oedipus is buried and all the rites are performed, Theseus comes out and comforts Antigone and Ismene. Antigone begs to visit the tomb of her father and asks to be buried with him because she doesn't know what her life is without him. She has devoted her entire life to him, and what is she supposed to do now? Theseus tells her that he promised Oedipus and he gave his word that no one would know where he was buried for their own protection. And Theseus only breaks his promises to beautiful princesses from Crete who help him defeat the Minotaur. So he had to keep it. Antigone agrees, tells him that makes sense, and then asks if he can arrange passage back to Thebes for her so she can try and stop her brother. So that is where Oedipus at Colonist ends, but we're going to go straight into 7 Against Thebes and Antigone because that's it picks up exactly where it lets off. So 7 Against Thebes, they are not successful. So let's talk about that a little bit real quick. And I apologize in advance for name butchering, because it's just gonna happen. If you've already heard, I've already butchered the names. It's just gonna happen more. So when Polynices left Thebes, he married a woman named Argia, who is the daughter of Adrastus, the king of Argos, which is why Argos was so willing to get behind him. Amphiaraus, who is a seer, saw that this was not going to be successful, but he was forced to join the expedition anyway as one of the 7, even though he was I don't want to be here. This is going to end in everyone's death, guys. This is not going to be positive. But nobody listened to him because he's like Cassandra in that way, I guess. No one listens to his prophecies. So they got their second omen of, hey, maybe this isn't the best idea and perhaps we should just let this whole thing go, when the 7 Against Thebes were passing through Nemea, when they met Hypsipyle, who was the nurse of an infant named Epheltes, and they asked the nurse which way was the spring so that they could refill their water. So she sets the infant down for just a moment to direct them, and in that moment where she sets them down to sort of show them where the spring is of fresh water, a serpent comes and kills Epheltes. And Amphiaraus is oh, you can't see me because this is a podcast, but I am gesturing aggressively. Is this not enough of a sign for you that this is not what we should be doing, guys? It is not too late for us to turn back and not go to Thebes. So the seven arrive in Thebes, and Titius goes in and tries to negotiate peace. It does not work. So Titius is like, okay, fine. I challenge you to many contests and duels. But what the people in Thebes don't know is that he's actually favored by Athena. So he wins every single one of them. And then when 50 people attack him, he kills 49 of them and leaves one survivor so they can tell what happened. And so this starts the war. So it seems like the gods we're not really on the side of the seven against Thebes, because Capenius is struck down by Zeus's thunderbolt like immediately. He tries to climb the wall of Thebes and doesn't even make it halfway before he's struck down by a thunderbolt. Amphiaraus the seer was just swallowed by the earth, which is also caused by Zeus. Titius, the one who was an amazing warrior, was mortally wounded, but because he was favored by Athena, she was actually going to save him and make him immortal. But she looked down on the battlefield and saw that he went zombie mode and was literally eating the brains of the man who attacked him. And she decided that maybe we don't want that one to be immortal. She is the goddess of wisdom after all. So the other three were killed by guards rather undramatically, and finally falling victim to their father's curse. Polynices and Eteocles dueled each other one-on-one and ended up killing each other. In the versions of the story where Adrastus is one of the seven, he actually escapes. He was the only one of the seven who survives because he fled on horseback. But again, he's not always like one of the ones who's included in the telling of the story. When he's in it, Eteocles is the one that's left out, but he dies. So it's much more of a Greek tragedy when there are no survivors. So that tends to be the one that's more widely accepted as one where all of the seven against Thebes end up not being victorious and dying. So that's what happens in Aeschylus's play Seven Against Thebes. That's what happens like in between Oedipus at Colonus and Antigone. It's kind of important to know that because Antigone doesn't like talk about it too much. It's just sort of like, there was a war and people died. The end. Let's get on with the story. So I felt like it was important to sort of like give you guys that background because it is quite interesting. So Antigone begins with Antigone being extremely distraught. She runs over to Ismene and breaks the news to her that not only are both of their brothers dead so soon after their father died, but Creon has decided that Eteocles and his men, so the man who was king, the brother who was king at the time, he and his men will be buried with full military honors and full burial rites. They will go to the underworld with honors, but Polynices and his men will be left as food for the birds and the dogs. Which, like we talked about in Oedipus, like that is super offensive and disrespectful today. But in ancient Greece, this is one of the worst things you can do to someone. And to try to make sure that this decree is followed, Creon also adds to it that if you try and bury any of them, you will be stoned to death in the public square. So Antigone is like, okay, when are we doing this? And Ismene is like, we're not? Did you miss the whole stone to death thing? Like, I don't really feel like being stoned to death for burying my brother. Like, I know it's what I should be doing, but like, I mean, it's the law and I don't really want to break the law. So Antigone is like, whatever, Creon can fuck right off. I'm going to bury my brother. Are you a good sister or are you going to betray your family? Which is not fair to put into those extremes and to like guilt Ismene into essentially committing suicide. Ismene is very confined by societal and gender expectations. She tells Antigone that she hopes that Polynices will forgive her, but she says like, I'm just a woman. I can't fight off Creon's men. And it's my duty to be obedient as a woman in Greek society. And Antigone is like, fuck being obedient, especially to men and their laws, because I follow the laws of the gods and we're dead for a lot longer than we are alive. So I'm going to honor the dead and honor the gods. And if that means I die, then so be it. Like, I'm gonna die anyway. Let it be for a good cause. Let me become a martyr. Ismene tries to convince her not to do it and says she's really scared for Antigone. Antigone's like a little bit of an asshole and is like, don't worry about me. I'll be fucking fine. You just worry about yourself and your choices. It's very like Elphaba versus Glinda, defying gravity, Wicked. I've been listening to a lot of Wicked show tunes lately. So we're essentially back in quarantine here in Salem. So anyway, Ismene is like, I don't support what you're doing, but I won't tell anyone. Antigone's like, fucking tell them. I don't give a shit. Make sure that they know that I did it, and make sure they know that you don't have anything to do with it, so that when they come down on me, you'll be safe. So fuck off now and let me like figure out everything I need to do now by myself. So Creon then comes out and he addresses all the people of Thebes and repeats everything I've already said about nobody burying Polynices. And then a messenger comes in and is like, someone has buried Polynices. And Creon is like, what the fuck? I just finished talking. So Polynices wasn't fully buried. It's described by the messenger as like just enough covering of dirt to put his soul at ease. One of Creon's advisors wonder if it was the gods because there were no footprints or carriage tracks or signs of any animals who may have done it. And Creon is like, you old fuck, you really think that it was the gods? When the gods literally intervened to strike down these men? No, someone did this. There is a whole group of anarchists who have been whispering in the alleyways, and y'all need to figure this out or your deaths will be the least of your concerns. So he tells everyone to go away because their mere presence is just distressing him. And the messenger's like, is it us or is it your conscience, my lord? And Creon's like, oh, okay, Freud. Why don't you shut the fuck up and work on this whole complex with my brother-in-law and then leave me alone? And he storms off. And the messenger's like, okay, let me try and figure this out so he doesn't kill me or whatever. And he literally catches Antigone in the act of burying her brother. And he brings her to the castle and Creon is like, fuck, Antigone, what have you done? And she's like, yeah, I buried my brother. And he's like, I'm sorry, what? And she's like, did I stutter? I said I buried my brother. I buried my brother Polynices. I buried him with my hands. I buried him. He was laying on the ground and I covered him with dirt so that he can go. Yes. Do you need me to describe it in a different way for you? I buried my brother. And Creon was like, did you not hear what I said about not burying your brother and his men? And did you hear what I said about the stoned to death part? And she's like, yeah, I pretty much shouted it from the castle steps. Who wouldn't be able to hear it? I'm pretty sure they heard you on Mount Olympus. But the laws of the gods are higher than the laws of men. And I know I'm going to die because we all die. And if this has hastened that for me, then I'm fine with it. Because there's so much evil around me right now in this city that death will be welcomed as a friend. I did what was right, and I don't care if you think I'm being foolish. So Creon tells her that she is just like her father and that he cannot show her any mercy regardless of his relationship to her, and he has to show everyone that he's a man. He literally says in the translation that I read, quote, who is the man here, she or I, if this crime goes unpunished? So she's like emasculating him and he doesn't like it. So Antigone tells him, just shut the fuck up and kill me already. Like, people are praising me in the streets for what I've done. And I really just don't care about you and your opinions and anything that you have to say, Creon. So just kill me. Like, I'm ready. Go stone me in the square or whatever. Creon tells her no one shares her opinion. And she's like, fucking everyone shares my opinion, but they won't say it because they're scared of you. And I'm not scared of you, you fuck face. So one of Creon's men then like drags Ismene in and he throws her down before Creon and he demands to know if she's going to confess that she had a part in burying Polynices as well, or if she's going to deny it. She starts crying and says, if Antigone will allow me, I'd like to confess. Antigone is like, thanks, but no thanks. You had nothing to do with this. So don't try to come in now at the end after it's done and after I've literally gotten my hands dirty because you regret not getting involved in the first place. You have no right to come in here and say that. And Ismene is like, why won't you let me die with you? And Crane was like, okay, so like one of you has lost your mind. The other one never had a mind to begin with. Got it. Like, you're both going to be guilty and you're both going to go to jail. And Ismene is like, shut the fuck up, Creon. Grief makes you do crazy things. All of my fucking family has died because you're so goddamn stubborn. And now my sister is going to die too. Did you forget that you promised our father that you would take care of us? And now you're threatening to kill her. And now you're going to threaten to kill me too. Like, what am I supposed to do without her? What is your son supposed to do without her? Creon, did you forget that they're engaged? Because it was like totally okay to marry cousins back then. This is the first time that we're introduced to this as the audience, but Antigone is engaged to a boy named Haman, who is Creon's son. And Creon literally says, quote, there are places enough for him to push his plow. Gotta love Greek mythology. And Antigone and Ismene are arrested. So after they're arrested, Haman comes in and Creon is like, before you start, are you here to defend your fiance or are you here to be reasonable? And Haman is like, I am your son. No marriage means more than you. But while I'm here and while you're talking about being reasonable, Dad, I am never going to tell you that you're being unreasonable. I would never say that. But other people in town might be saying that. I don't know who. I'm just like, I've heard whispers that no woman has ever died so unreasonably for doing something so generous and selfless. Like, she covered her brother's body so that the dogs and the vultures couldn't get to it. And that shouldn't be a crime. She should be honored. But that's not what I'm saying. Like, that's what other people are saying. Dear father of mine, I am but a young man and I know nothing. But perhaps you should listen to other people who know more than me. And who maybe know more than you. Just be reasonable and listen to them who are saying that you're being unreasonable. And Kriyana's like, you would really stand up for an anarchist? And Haman's like, of course not. I have no pity for criminals. And Kriyana's like, well, she is now a criminal. And Haman's like, that's not what people are saying, but I'm too young and stupid to know the difference, right? And Creon is like starting to catch on that Haman is kind of patronizing him. So he screams that I am the king and everyone will listen to me. And I am the one who makes the orders and I am the one who makes the decisions all by myself. And Haman says the only thing that one person can rule over on their own is the barren desert. And Creon is like, are you stepping up to me? Step up to the streets. And Haman tells him he has no problem with his father. He has a problem with justice. Creon responds that everything that I'm doing is within my rights as king. Haman responds that he has no right to trample on what the gods say and decree. And if Creon goes through with executing Antigone, then there will be more than one death. And Creon is enraged. And he's like, Are you threatening me? I'll fucking kill her now. I'll fucking kill her right in front of you, Haman, with my own goddamn hands. And then we'll see what happens. And Haman is like, no, you're not. And just like walks out. Props to Haman. Snaps for Haman. So Creon calms down a little bit, but decides that Ismene is innocent. She'll be released. And that Antigone will not be stoned in the streets, which will make her a martyr, but he will lock her in the cave with limited resources. If she's locked in a cave, then it's in the gods' hands, and Creon's hands are clean, right? Like, fancy little loophole we see here, right? Just like, if I don't kill the baby myself, I can't be guilty for it, but if I just leave it on the mountainside, I'm not the one who did it. It's the animals and the gods, not me. So Antigone is brought out and marched through the city, and she's taken to this cave. And as she like walks by everyone is crying. There's not a dry eye. And they're like, we are not for this. Like, we cannot be for this. And Antigone turns and addresses all of them, saying, look at me and pity me as I turn into the night and say goodbye to the sun forever. The onlookers cry and tell her that they can't believe her fate. What woman has walked into a fate like this before? And at least she can take comfort in the glory that she will have in the underworld. Maybe not in this world, but that she'll have in the underworld. And Antigone's like, can you wait until I'm in the cave to fucking make jokes? Seriously? You're talking about glory as I'm walking to my death after being denied pity and after I've been judged without justice. Stay quiet and just like give me your thoughts and prayers or whatever in silence. And one of Creon's men tells her that it's just the consequences of her own actions. And Antigone's like, shut the fuck up already and let me go into my goddamn cave where I can finally just have some peace and quiet. Jesus Christ. I guess not Jesus, because this is Greek mythology. So she's like, let me just have some goddamn silence. Zeus. It does not have the same ring to it, but Zeus doesn't have a last name. So she's like, just let me have some peace and quiet. Zeus, like, goddamn moon. So she stands before the cave that will become her tomb and calls to Persephone to welcome her. She says she looks forward to seeing her father and mother again and her brother Polynices, probably Polynices most of all, because the reason that he would be in the underworld at all is because of what she did. Because regardless of the mistakes and the decisions that Polynices may have made, he's still her brother. And she made the right decision and she doesn't regret anything. But she knows that one day Creon will regret everything. and she hopes that his punishment will be equal to her own. She calls on Thebes to look at her and remember her, and walks into the cave without looking over her shoulder. So a day or two later, Tiresias comes and is like, Creon, what the fuck have you done? I was sitting down, I was enjoying the day, listening to the birds, as I do because I'm old as fuck, and they started fucking killing each other. And that scared the crap out of me because this is a really bad omen. So I set the fires to make my offering to the gods, and the fucking fires wouldn't even light. The gods are pissed because you have no sense. You're being completely unreasonable. Like, the kid's already dead, just let him be fucking buried. Like, why are you trying to kill him twice? I swear to God, you fix this or so help me. Creon chooses now to finally listen to me and say he's not going to listen to prophets and oracles anymore because they've done him no good in the past. And then he falls into the same reasoning that Oedipus had when he talks to Tiresias, saying that his skills are for sale, that he's in cahoots with someone, and that he's a fraud, which, like, Creon, I don't like Tiresias any more than you do, and I hate the oracle. They literally, it enrages me when people go to the oracle and to the prophets, but he has never been wrong. Tiresias calls Creon a sick fuck. Creon calls Tiresias a sellout. Creon tells Tiresias that he's tired of being a butt to the dull arrows of old and feeble fortune tellers. So Tiresias tells him that he'll be leaving, but not before I drop my bomb. And what's one more arrow from a prophet before I go? Tiresias tells Creon that it will not be long until the Furies and the dark gods of the underworld will divvy out their punishments unto him. Corpse for corpse, flesh of your own flesh, you have thrust the child of this world into living night, and kept from the gods below the child that is theirs. The one on the grave before her death, and the other dead and denied his grave. This is your crime. The curses are already descending upon you from the families in far-off cities who mourn for their unburied sons outside the walls of Thebes. Your quiet home will be filled with men and women weeping. Do you want to buy my services now, Creon? Because they're not for fucking sale. And then he puts on his sunglasses and saunters off like a bamf. So one of Creon's advisors tells Creon that he knows it's not what he wants to hear, but Tiresias has literally never been wrong. Creon is shitting bricks. He's like, I fucking know, man. I talk a lot of talk, but I'm freaking the fuck out. What do I do? And his advisor is like, go and free Antigone. It hasn't been that long. Go build a tomb for Polynices and go bury all of his men and try to fix this before it gets any worse. So Creon agrees and goes to summon people to help him, and his advisor is like, no, you will do it. You will free Antigone. You will bury Polynices. You will help bury the others. You caused this. You're going to undo it, okay? So Creon leaves to do these things, and then it all happens like off stage. We don't actually see it. And then after a little while, a messenger comes in, and he's like, I cannot believe what's happened. How the fates have turned. Creon was once happy, and now he is like a walking dead man. Everything that made him happy, his victories in battle, his control of the land, his beautiful children, they are all gone. Creon's wife Eurydice walks in, having overheard this, and is like, I'm sorry, what happened? Messenger tells her that Creon went and did everything that he needed to do for Polynices. He bathed his body, or like the remains of his body after decaying animals. He poured the libations. They prayed to Hecate and Hades, and they burned him so that he can enter the underworld properly. Then they race over to Antigone's cave, and Creon had actually sent a group ahead that he would meet there. And as he's making his way to the cave, he hears crying and screaming that sound like Haman's voice. So he peeks into the cave, and he sees Haman cradling Antigone in his arms, and he's wailing, and he's screaming, and he's inconsolable. Creon enters the cave and falls to his knees in front of Haman, and in between his wails, Haman screams at his father that Antigone has been stolen from him, and that he loved her so deeply, and now she's gone because she hanged herself. Creon tries to apologize, and Haman spits in his face before drawing his sword and lunging at his father. His thrusts miss, and in a flash Haman takes the sword and plunges it into himself. And with his dying breaths, he gathered Antigone into his arms, his red blood staining her white dress that she wore, making her look like a bride. And now he lies in the tomb, dead with the dead. And she is at last his bride. Without a word, Eurydice runs into the palace just as Creon comes in carrying the body of his son. He asks that no one says anything to him because there is nothing that can be said that can touch him anymore. And then a servant comes out and is like, I believe I have something that I have to say that will touch you, sir, because your wife is dead. She went before the altar of Athena and cried out for both of her sons. Her first son, Megarius, died in the Battle of Thebes between Polynices and Eteocles, and Haman was her only surviving son, and he just committed suicide. So she took a dagger and she stabbed herself in the heart, and with her dying breath, she cursed Creon, blaming him for the death of her children, and now hers as well. Creon asks, is there no pity for me? I was dead, and these words are death again. Can it be true that my wife is dead? Has death bred death? He admits his guilt and said that he hopes that death comes quickly for him, and he hopes to never see the sun again. He hopes to walk into a cave and become a child of the night. Creon admits that he has been rash and foolish, and his pride has brought everything to dust. And Antigone ends with one of the chorus members stepping forward and saying, there is no happiness where there is no wisdom, and there is no wisdom but in submission to the gods. Big words are always punished, and proud men in old age learn to be wise. So the Greeks had this very common theme of hubris, especially in their tragedies. Hubris is defined as excessive pride to the point where it's defiant to the gods, and it leads to the goddess Nemesis taking over. Her job is literally to enact retribution against those who succumb to hubris, and that's definitely what happened here. So sorry that ended on a bit of a bummer, and sorry that my voice has decided to run off and disappear into the night. But Antigone is one of my favorites, and it was one of the first myths that I wanted to do, but like others popped up that seemed like more important, or like a better fit with what was going on at the time with like the holidays or the time of years or social commentary or anything like that. It had to happen. She's been my favorite since the first time I read this play, like 15 years ago, if not longer, and feeling really old saying that. So there's just something to me about like a strong female character who isn't okay with just like being submissive and looking the other way when terrible things are happening around them when they can do something about it. I read this play at a really impressionable time in my life for the first time when I was 14. And I think that it partially like kind of shaped me, because I admired Antigone so much. And I think that as heavy as this play is, that it's important to remember to fight for what you believe in. Like maybe not to the extent that Antigone did to become a martyr, but it's important to stand up for what you believe in. Unless what you believe in makes you a dick, then you can sit the fuck down. So anyway, thanks so much for listening today. If you like what you heard, or at least liked hearing me talking about depressing shit, please consider subscribing or leaving a review or joining my Patreon at patreon.com/effeduphistory. If you have a story from history or mythology, or debuting coming soon, historical true crime. And by historical true crime, I mean like pre-1950s or so. Please reach out. I'm always looking for new ideas. You can email me at effeduphistory@gmail.com or reach out on any of my socials, which are at effeduphistory. I'm also going to have like all of my contact info in the description box. And remember, friends, history may be watching you, so don't fuck it up. And remember to always do what's right.